Welcome everyone to Monday Match Analysis. I'm Gill Gross. Carlos Alcaraz has won his 6th title in his last 7 events. The incredible run continues, this time an ATP 500 victory in Tokyo. His debut there, he beats Taylor Fritz. Final score 6-4, 6-4. We're going to have analysis of that on the show, but we'll also have our quarter-by-quarter Shanghai Masters prediction with dark horses, upset alerts, early popcorn matches, and of course, quarterfinal and final weekend predictions. Tomorrow is, or tonight, depending on, I don't know, the time zones are crazy. But anyway, coming up soon is the Beijing final, which is Jannik Sinner against Lerner Tien, first ATP final for Lerner. I will come out with something on that. It'll probably be a more casual post-match kind of deal. But for this full show, Monday Match Analysis, let's get into it. I want to point out that Alcaraz for the season is now above 90% win rate on the year. Season's not over, so that won't necessarily be the case when the year finishes, but Alcaraz has climbed above that benchmark, which I have always said is a fantastic benchmark for a special, I don't know if the word generational is too strong, because we have seen it happen a few times, more than a few. Like, we've seen it 9 times since the turn of the century in men's tennis. But if you think about the great career that Novak Djokovic had, he did it twice. The great career that Rafael Nadal had, he did it twice. Federer 4 times, and 3 of them were in the mid-2000s when he just wasn't losing much, before he started to be tested more thoroughly by Nadal and Djokovic, right? You know, Serena did it 4 times. Venus did it once. Justine Henin did it once. It's a rare thing. It means you are having a dominant season, right? I mean, let's just put it that way. If you finished the year above 90%, and Jannik Sinner did it last year, by the way, it means you've had a dominant season. Alcaraz is now there. So Alcaraz beats Fritz in straights, a little over a week removed from losing to Taylor at Laver Cup. I go back and forth on this. I don't think it's fair to completely reframe and relitigate the Laver Cup result based on what ends up happening thereafter. I think it's not completely out of bounds. Like, it is part of the larger context, certainly, of what happens after, and therefore, you know, was it a turning point? Did it spark something? I get that part of it, but at the end of the day, it's 2 separate matches. But what I will say is, circumstantially, Alcaraz was always going to be tougher to beat in a Tokyo final. That's my opinion, at least. Alcaraz is now 25-7 in finals. He rises to these occasions. And it's a pretty different situation compared to what you get at Laver Cup, where you go to a venue, you practice a couple days, you play a standalone match, versus you've been in the same place for over a week. You've played multiple matches in those same conditions. You've built to that point. There's an element of physicality. There's an element of emotional and mental build up to that moment. And Carlos has shown time and time again that it's one thing beating him, it's another thing beating him in a final. And it's even harder to beat him in a final. All right, so a couple of points I want to make. And I actually, funny enough, I do want to frame my analysis of this match partially based on what we saw at Laver Cup, because I think it can just inform, it certainly informed the way I watched this match. But first I want to get to some independent Alcaraz points. This is as well as I have seen Carlos use the drop shot on a hard court this week. Hard court is the most difficult surface to drop shot on based on court position, traction, the way the ball responds to the court on the bounce. It's just more of a challenge to use the drop shot effectively, but Carlos's feel was perfect in this match and throughout the week. The lobs behind it are so good. That's an underrated aspect of it. How well Alcaraz lobs off of both wings behind the drop shot. And if you lift up on the ball, If Alcaraz sees that the ball is dropping below the level of the net and you're going to lift up, that's where Carlos is going to kind of step into no man's land because he doesn't want to get redropped. But then if you go deep, Alcaraz is usually volleying the next ball, which takes away your recovery time. And oftentimes it's a lob volley, or if there's open court, he can pass you with that second volley. But the positioning is always on point. And of course, it doesn't matter how big the point is, Alcaraz executes. There's no, I'm not going to drop shot because this is a pressure point and I'm too tight to execute finesse here and to be delicate. That has never, ever been even a part of the math equation for Carlos Alcaraz. It just hasn't. He has such command over that shot that he can use it under pressure, and it makes you rethink the way you even look at a drop shot. Because I mean, how many coaches over the years have said no drop shots on big points? A lot. Back-to-back drop shot winners from Alcaraz, serving for the match, 5-4, 30-all. He was up 5-1 in the second set. That lead evaporated. Dicey. Are we choking here? Are we blowing a lead? 5-4, 30-all. First ball drop shot on a backhand, perfect. First ball drop shot on a forehand, perfect. Both of them were winners. Taylor didn't get to either of them. And both returns came in with considerable pace. I mean, they weren't crushed by any means, but they were hard returns with Alcaraz on the baseline just to be able to execute that. Like, forget the X's and O's of whether or not it was the right shot. The ability to execute that is special. Tactically, the big thing that I saw from Alcaraz was just the backhand direction, just going down the line a ton, going middle a ton, really trying to not take his backhand cross court. And I just thought it fed his forehand so incredibly well. It fed his forehand so much better than had he tried to break Fritz down by taking the backhand cross court. So one thing about Taylor's backhand, it is an incredibly precise weapon. He hits it on a dime, right? So like Fritz, whether he goes cross court or down the line, what makes his backhand so good is the precision, which manifests itself in great depth, and sometimes great width, oftentimes both. He puts that backhand cross in the corner. He puts it in the corner. And Carlos can't attack from that position, right? He's just kind of stuck on his backhand. He can wait for a chance to change down the line, but like ultimately, he's trying to get a forehand. He's trying to get a forehand look. And if you want a forehand look, going hard at Taylor's backhand, not really the way. Now, if Fritz had a weaker backhand, then it would certainly be an opportunity. You go to the backhand and you look for the runaround, right? That trick, that tactic is oftentimes a go-to. Against Taylor, not a go-to. Backhand is too precise. So what are we going to do? We're going to trade a lot hard down the line. We're going to trade a lot hard down the middle at Fritz's forehand. And then Carlos is able to generate more forehands. Commentators said at the start of the second set that Alcaraz's backhand down the line rate was 40%. Really, really high. I don't know what he ended the match at, but that tactically was, I think, the one big Fritz-specific thing he implemented that ended up working really well. Now, on the Taylor side of things, was he able to copy and paste what worked at Laver Cup? Let's kind of go down the list. So, first thing, bigger rally balls. Was Taylor able to hit bigger on a regular basis, to stay out in front of points, to make sure that he was never giving Alcaraz enough oxygen to dictate? I think the attempt was certainly there. Fritz was unleashing on the forehand whenever he had a chance to do so. That's the side that I think fluctuates a lot. Sometimes you'll see Taylor just get a little bit safe and tentative. Sometimes you'll see him unloading. And Taylor just knows against these top players, not just Alcaraz, but certainly against Alcaraz, it has to be the unloading. Even if he's missing, you got to stick with it. And I talked to Taylor about that at the US Open before he played Djokovic. And I asked him, how much in a match like this, how much are you playing your game versus trying to bring something different to the table, bring something even better to the table? And Taylor said, the big thing that I have to adjust against the top players is I can't go into safe mode, which Fritz will often do. If he's playing world number 60 and Taylor is missing a lot of balls, he at once will stop missing. He will say, what am I doing? No more missing. I'm playing 60 in the world. Let's make this guy come up with something. And he'll go into safe mode. That's the part of Fritz's game that, to his credit, he generally throws out the window when he has to, although sometimes he'll get really tight in a big match and he'll fall into it. That didn't happen in this match. I thought Fritz kept unleashing, but there are trade-offs. The 4-all game in the first set, the decisive game in the first set, when Alcaraz broke serve, Fritz made aggressive errors. Not bad errors necessarily, but Fritz made aggressive errors. But what did Alcaraz do? Well, first off, Alcaraz made solid, deep returns. Taylor missed 2+1 balls where he was trying to take some control of the point off of a good, deep Alcaraz return. Had Alcaraz's return been shorter, the task would not have been as difficult. Taylor probably wouldn't have missed. But it's the quality of the Alcaraz return combined with the desperation to do damage that results in an overzealous, high-risk profile shot and ultimately a Fritz error. There was also a rally in this 4-all game where Alcaraz hit a great backhand cross-court trade. Beautiful, right in the corner. And Fritz responded with the backhand cross-court that he pulled just wide. And you could just see it was, I'm trying to keep this backhand out of trouble. And it needs to be so good in order for me to do so. Because as soon as Alcaraz hit the really nice trade, you know that he was leaning left, looking for a forehand on the next ball. And Fritz said, you're not going to get that forehand. And he just squeezed himself on the backhand cross-court trade. That's the trade-off to Taylor trying to go bigger on his rally balls. And maybe once in a while, he might play a match where he can do that without missing. But what we see most of the time, we've seen that also in Fritz's matches against Jannik Sinner, US Open final, year-end championship final last year. Most of the time, that's not how it's going to work. Taylor's going to make some big errors because he's ramping it up. All right, more backhand down the line. I thought that that's something that Fritz, when he had some time and some angle to work with, he went after it. But that was rare. Like, that's something that Alcaraz really took away. He wasn't taking his backhand cross with any kind of regularity. And that was not allowing Taylor to really use his backhand down the line as often as he might want to. So I didn't think that Fritz's backhand down the line was ever a big factor. What about heightened aggression on the second serve and the return? Second serve, sure. I mean, Fritz only won 40% of second serve points, but I don't think that was a product of hitting slow second serves or attackable second serves. But you know what? Now that I think about it, Taylor did get attacked. Kicking some balls to Alcaraz's backhand. There was some good crush and rush from Carlos. On one of them, he blew a volley and ended up not converting on a break point. But there was some good crush and rush for Carlos, so I don't know that Fritz really stuck to that. But Taylor did double fault 3 times early. So that might be another example. Double fault a few times, you get scared off of going after the second serve. What about the second return? Now, here's something that I don't think Fritz was able to replicate. It's something that he kind of got away from. Well, Fritz had a break point at love 1 in the first set, and he had a backhand return, and he hit his standard second serve return, which was actually, by the way, a perfectly executed standard second serve return. Taylor went backhand cross, a little bit of width, a little bit of depth, solid speed. It was a stock return. Alcaraz hit a backhand down the line winner off of it. At 5-4 30 all, we've already talked about Alcaraz's drop shot on this point, but this was another second serve return. And Fritz had momentum, and he hit another decent return. It went into Alcaraz's backhand. That's good. It had some pace. Okay. It was a little short, though. And Alcaraz hit a drop shot winner off of it. These are two massive, massive points in the match where would I describe Taylor as fearless? Not really. Not bad, but not fearless, not daring. These are kinds of the words that sprung to mind when watching him at Laver Cup. Couldn't really bring it here. And again, this is all in the context of Alcaraz being incredible. What about net rushing? Being decisive. This was the main thing I was watching for, by the way, because I felt like the level of decisiveness that Fritz was charging the net at Laver Cup, I'd never seen that from Taylor. And it was the biggest area where I'm like, is he really feeling big pressure if he's doing that? Because I've never seen him do that in a big match. Lo and behold, maybe it was a feel thing. Maybe it was a tactical. I mean, who knows if there were other reasons, but whatever the case may be, Fritz's net rushing was a non-factor in this match. It was nothing. It was a nothing burger. It played no role. None. He was 4 out of 10 at the net. I think most of those were Alcaraz drop shots. At least half of them were Alcaraz drop shots. The only ball that Taylor seemed to be getting in on was he would hit a wide serve on the deuce side. He'd hit a backhand cross court into open court. He sometimes got in off of that +1 ball. That was like the only circumstance where it looked like Taylor was actually on a regular basis coming in. So that was gone. Which is the one thing. I thought Fritz played well in this match. I don't think he could have done much. That was the one thing. It was like, all right, this worked at Laver Cup. This was the biggest thing that you did out of the ordinary at Laver Cup. Let's try to at least bring that to the table. He couldn't do it. Again, maybe there was less opportunity to do it. Maybe it was the conditions. Maybe I'd be curious to hear Taylor's take. But again, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, he didn't do it. I do think the biggest difference in this match was from this match to Laver Cup, though, was Alcaraz. I don't think it was Fritz. I think the biggest difference was Alcaraz. Carlos, on the forehand side, wasn't at his best in that match at Laver Cup. He gave away more than he would normally give away off of that wing. And that was not the case in Tokyo. He had a great forehand day. And Alcaraz doesn't often lose on a great forehand day. It's like unbelievably rare. It basically doesn't happen. I've got more on the Alcaraz forehand. I'm actually going to save it for another time because we've still got a Shanghai preview to get into. And I know for a fact there's going to be other opportunities for me to get into this forehand point. But Carlos, what I'll say, I'll leave it here. What Alcaraz has been doing recently on the forehand is like a level up. It's a level up from even what a forehand that I already held in very, very high regard, the highest of regard, quite frankly. He has continued to make it even better. All right, quick break and then a Shanghai preview. Transition into the Shanghai preview kind of writes itself, pretty natural here, and it's the one benefit of having not done the Shanghai preview yesterday. Alcaraz pulled out today, so no Carlos in Shanghai due to the ankle. He had I forget which match it was, but Carlos tweaked his ankle, rolled his ankle. I don't know what word is more appropriate in this case. Early on in the Tokyo run, it was something that clearly was giving him some pain at times. I didn't notice like a ton of compromised movement other than maybe not hitting the sliding open stance backhand and instead choosing to crossover step and slice. And by the way, Alcaraz's feel is so good on that ball that it's not much of a disadvantage for him. That's the only movement thing I noticed, but there might be some swelling. There might be some fatigue overall. And ultimately, this is a no-brainer. This is the luxury of being a top player. This is what you should do if you are smart. Not some folks have misstepped in this sense. Some players have not managed themselves as well as maybe they should have. But if you are not 100% and you're not ramping up for a major and it's a 11-month season, you should not push yourself. You should take rest. You should allow your injuries to heal. You should not take a risk that because the ankle is a little beat up, you might hurt something else because you're overcompensating. Or you do long-term damage to the cartilage in your ankle or whatever the negative consequences might be of trying to play through that. Like, you should not. So for Alcaraz, do I think if he had to play Shanghai, he could? Well, based on what I saw in Tokyo, yes, he probably could. That doesn't mean he should. It's a long, long season. It would have been the same 4 top seeds from last year in Shanghai. Alcaraz, Sinner, Zverev, and Djokovic would have been the same, which I wanted to talk about because it is pretty rare, I think, that in back-to-back years in Shanghai, you'd have the same group, other than maybe in the Big Four era, then maybe you'd expect to have the same group. But with, 2 full Grand Slam calendar run-throughs, and you're left with the same top 4, it just kind of tells you what I think a lot of people have felt, which is that narratively, there hasn't been a lot of major shifts. I mean, 2 full Grand Slam calendar run-throughs, and Alcaraz is stock up compared to where he was this time last year. Sinner is about the same. Zverev is stock down a little bit. Djokovic is basically the same. Fritz is pretty clearly the next guy. I mean, again, we're talking about maybe some subtle narrative shifts, but we're kind of in the same ballpark, which is interesting. So that's the one thing I wanted to say. And by the way, we'll get into it, but because the draw was already made, Fritz doesn't get into the top 4. They don't move the top seeds around, which is pretty important for how this draw shook out. The other note before I get into the quarter by quarter is that the balls are different this year. Wilson is out. Jannik is in. The Wilson balls were a source of frustration last year. The players felt like it was fluffing up and playing too slowly. So considering that the Shanghai courts are typically pretty slick, ball goes through quickly, it'll probably play faster next year. If the balls are not going to fluff up as much, then overall the conditions will probably play a little bit quicker this year. But Shanghai has always been pretty quick. It's just the players felt the balls were getting in the way of that last year. All right. So let's get into it. Alex de Minaur is the top seed in this top quarter with Alcaraz's withdrawal. He's the number 7 seed. He's got Khachanov, Medvedev, Davidovich Fokina, Tsitsipas, Nakashima, Nori, and Mute. My dark horse here is Lerner Tien. My upset alert is Karen Khachanov. My early popcorn are the de Minaur and Medvedev openers. So Tien is in the Beijing final. He's the form player who now benefits from Alcaraz's withdrawal. Carlos would have been his second round match. Instead, the highest seed in his 8th is Daniil Medvedev, who he now holds a 2-0 record against. It's just kind of a no-brainer here to make him dark horse with all of that. Now, obviously, especially if you're not a top player, which Lerner Tien is not at this point in time, it's hard to have 2 big runs back-to-back weeks. It takes a lot out of you, emotionally and physically. I'll just say that Lerner Tien, on the Challenger Tour, showed in a big way that he can go week after week after week after week and not get tired and not stop, because he has gone on some unbelievable win streaks. particularly last year, where he showed an incredible level of stamina and endurance. And it seems to be everybody who Lerner Tien plays who is melting physically while Lerner stands tall. And this is a guy who, in order to win his whole life, has had to play a lot of long rallies and do a lot of running. And until I'm proven otherwise, I'm not going to get worried about Lerner Tien getting tired. Upset alert would be Karen Khachanov. A couple of suspect losses since retiring in Cincinnati. And he plays Kovacevic, who can get red hot once in a while. You know, it only happens a handful of weeks throughout the year, but Alex Kovacevic is a really talented shot maker when he gets going. Or Jerry Shung, who has not found his game since coming back from injury, but that could happen quickly. And sometimes it happens all at once. Shung gets a win over Kovacevic. He's got a wild card in his home country. I think it's a little bit scary for Khachanov in that opener. Early popcorn, speaking of openers, it's going to be de Minaur or Medvedev in their opening matches. Medvedev could get Wu Yibing, who Daniil has already lost to on this Asian swing. De Minaur could get Terence Ottmann, who played Sinner really well in Beijing again. For a second time, Ottmann played Sinner very, very close. So de Minaur, Ottmann, Medvedev against Wu Yibing. Those are two openers, second round matches technically, that I think can be very, very good. All right, quarterfinal prediction here. I'm going to go with de Minaur defeats Davidovich Fokina. So first, elephant in the room, let's address it. Why not Medvedev? Technically, like on paper, great week for him in Beijing. Made just his second semifinal of the year. I know, and although this is the time of year where I just can't watch as much because of the time zones, what I have gathered out of Daniil, not just last week, but also the week before, is he's found some comfort playing a little bigger off the ground. He's serving a little better. He's still cramped after 2 sets against Lerner Tien. I mean, I struggle to come out of that saying, oh yeah, awesome, like Medvedev's back. I can't really get there. And of course he beat Zverev last week, but he has such ownership over Zverev that, I'll be honest, it makes me think less of the result. He has such comfort in that matchup that I don't put as much stock in it as I might if Medvedev beat somebody else of Zverev's caliber. And it was the same thing in Halle. Medvedev beat Zverev, made the final. I felt the same way. I said, all right, great week in Halle, but I didn't love that final. And I got to see more. And I got to see it sustained before I change my view of where he's at right now. So I hope I'm wrong. And this is a really nice draw opportunity with Alcaraz withdrawing. With Medvedev, I hope I'm wrong, but that was a taxing, kind of a long week. The ending wasn't great. I don't come into this Shanghai feeling like, you know, this is a huge moment where I'm putting Daniil in the quarterfinals. I'm going with Davidovich Fokina, and to me, it just looks like this quarter might be on his racket. Now, Medvedev beat Davidovich Fokina in Beijing. So there is that, but also Davidovich Fokina has played Medvedev in the past very competitively and has beaten Medvedev before. So I do think that could be a situation where Davidovich Fokina is fresher and Medvedev is a little more vulnerable, and that result could flip if it even comes to that. But Fokina, 22-14 on hard courts this year, 3 finals on this surface. Is he burnt out for the year? You know, that's the question. That's the concern, because since that run in Washington, he hasn't looked great. And it might be that it kind of just took too much out of him, and he's going to limp across the finish line here in 2025. But I think if that's not the case and Fokina can find a little spark here, he's got a good opportunity. De Minaur, I do have him getting through the quarter and making the semifinals. Alex is 45-12 this year against opponents ranked lower than him. At 4 of his last 6 events, he has avoided defeat against a player ranked below, meaning he has held up his end of the bargain as a top 20 or top 10 player, mind you, and not lost to anybody who he is supposed to beat. That's what Minaur does so well. I always prefer him in quick conditions because I like it when he gets a little bit of help offensively. And I think he should feel really good about himself because of how he just played Jannik Sinner. Didn't watch the full match, only watched the highlights, but wowza. Those were some highlights. I'll say those were some highlights. That looked like, and obviously he took a set, and Sinner has been a guy who de Minaur has had a lot of trouble even winning sets against. Let's go on to Alexander Zverev's quarter. He's the 3 seed. He's got Musetti, FAA, Lehechka, Menchik, Shapovalov, Dartery, and Mickelson. My dark horse here is Alejandro Tabilo. Upset alert is Alex Mickelson. Early popcorn, none. Tabilo, good to see him playing well again. He was having a horrible year. He dropped more than 100 spots this season after starting the year 23. But since coming to China after the US Open, he's won 13 of his last 15 matches. He won Chengdu as a qualifier. He's come through qualifying again here in Shanghai. He's very imposing. His weapons are great. The serve, the forehand, especially as a lefty, can be a lot to deal with. Not your typical South American who's going to play long rallies on the clay. No, he's a weapons player. He'll have to play Marcos Giron first round. He'll then have to face Felix and hope that Felix is still hungover from his wedding. Upset alert. Congrats, Felix. We're very happy for you. I'm very happy for them. They seem like such a great couple. All right. Upset alert is Alex Mickelson. It's just a tough draw. He's got to play the winner of Rinderknecht and Medjedovic. I've been liking what I've seen from Rinderknecht a lot, and I think at some point that I think Artur will get back around, inside the top 40 at some point based on how well he's playing. And Medjedovic has been stable, not explosive, but stable, getting some results here and there. And we know that he's another guy in quick conditions who can take the racket out of your hand with his quality of serve. So not easy for Mickelson. On a 4-match losing streak, including Laver Cup right now, is the American. Those two things together entice me to put Alex on upset alert. Quarterfinal prediction here. Oh, no early popcorn. I just didn't see anything here. Quarterfinal prediction is FAA defeats Zverev. So I am going to bet that Felix, always the consummate professional, has not partied too hard at his wedding and that he's going to be ready to go here. This is a time of year where Felix has traditionally played quite well. And this is his first event since the impeccable US Open run. Easily one of the most impressive runs of Felix's career. There may be some arguments that, and I should look at this. Maybe it's Felix's best run because a lot of his title runs have been 250s and 500s indoors. In the case of Rotterdam, at least a 500 indoors. The Adelaide run earlier this year, certainly not. The run to the Madrid final, certainly not. So it might have been his best run for my money, given how well he played. And, did something click for him? I still think that Felix is going to be a player who is going to run hot and cold. I'm not expecting that it's a new Felix who's going to be some sort of top 10 mainstay, but maybe he can build on that momentum in conditions that reward his offense. He plays Zverev really well. He's got a 3-6 record against Zverev. I know it's not unbelievable, but you expect Zverev to have a handle on the head-to-head given where these two have been ranked throughout their careers. And I get the sense that when FAA serves well and comes forward with confidence, he has an opportunity to play that match on his racket. And Zverev has not looked good. It's almost I considered not putting him in the quarterfinals. It's just Zverev tends to figure out ways to not take bad losses, at least for the most part. Zverev has lost early in Shanghai his last 2 times out. It seems like the back thing that he's dealing with isn't bad enough for him to stop playing, but has also made the serve softer and more playable. And Zverev has suffered a lot of deflating losses recently. I got the sense that he was kind of refreshed post-Wimbledon and that it was like a more positive Zverev who is going to maybe enjoy his tennis a little bit more, but it just feels like that's quickly gone south and it's reversed back into the gut punch at the US Open, looked really bad at Laver Cup, and then I'm actually blanking on what this week was. Whatever it was, it wasn't overly positive. Oh yeah, the Medvedev loss that I have already mentioned on this podcast. This does feel like a pretty big chance for Menchik. He played great in Shanghai last year. I want to shout him out. I just haven't been super impressed with any of his wins recently. So that's why I'm going Felix's way. Novak Djokovic is the 4 seed. He's got Shelton, Ruud, Rublev, Cerundolo, Caboli, Tiafoe, and Diallo. My dark horse here, Adrian Mannarino. Upset alert is Frances Tiafoe. And my early popcorn is the Djokovic opener. We're not sure exactly who it is, but I will tell you shortly. It feels good to put Mannarino back in the dark horse saddle. Oh, have I ever used that pun before? Dark horse saddle? I'm not sure. But I thought he was maybe finished the way he looked at the start of this year. He's 37 years old, just didn't look competitive at all. And I thought, okay, this might be the end for Mannarino. He's turned a corner since grass court season. Every week has been solid. He's moving well again. I thought like one of the points that I really want to hammer home with Mannarino is I think he had a chance to beat Ben Shelton at the US Open, even if Ben didn't get hurt. He's got 5 top 30 wins since Cincinnati. That's not a lot of tournaments. 5 top 30 wins. And I didn't write in my notes what the draw looks like for Adrian. Oh, he faces Berrettino. Oh my goodness. Berrettini in the first round. Best of 3 hard court for Berrettini, who hasn't been able to get things going recently. That's not terrible for Adrian, who's going to be definitely very precise in making Berrettini move around and kind of not allowing him to find a ton of runarounds and then going, short angle into Berrettini's forehand to really make sure that he's having to cover that part of the court as well. I do like Mannarino in that. And then Francisco Cerundolo, another winnable one. Then Casper Ruud, potentially in the 3rd round. So I could see a little resurgent run potentially for Adrian Mannarino. My upset alert, Tiafoe, 0-3 since the US Open. Only 2 main draw wins in Shanghai in his career, which maybe sounds a little bit worse than it is considering Shanghai was off the calendar for a couple years, but it's still not good. The US Open hangover is real for Francis. And sometimes that's been the case where Tiafoe has played well at the US Open, and that's occurred. But I think it's even worse when Francis feels disappointed with himself after the US Open. But he puts so much emotional capital into the Open, he never seems to play well afterwards. And again, when he lost to Shelton in that quarterfinal a couple years ago, that's when it really hit him hard. And so far, after that really disappointing loss to Struff, it's really hit him hard. He doesn't look right. And he plays Sonego or Hanfmann in the first round. Early popcorn, Cilic versus Basilashvili. Winner of that to play Djokovic. It's really the Djokovic match I'm talking about. I originally, by the way, had this as my early popcorn match where it was going to be Mute versus Cilic to play Djokovic. Mute and Cilic recently played a phenomenally entertaining Davis Cup match. Anyway, now Mute moved into Alcaraz's slot as the number 33 seed, which means it's Basilashvili who came through qualifying. He'll face Cilic. I'm still excited to watch that player against Djokovic. Still excited. I feel like the most fun Djokovic head-to-heads have always been the guys who can push him around a little bit. Because I think the most fun version of Novak is the counter-attacking version of Djokovic, the version of Djokovic who's trying to turn points around. To me, that's the most electric Novak Djokovic. I think he'll be hoping for Basilashvili because Nico's serve is just much more manageable than Marin's serve. I think Djokovic would take a lot of comfort in that versus the Cilic head-to-head. All right, quarterfinal prediction here is Djokovic defeats Gabriel Diallo, the youngster from Canada. He's actually not as young as you'd think because he had a pretty long college career, but you get the point. Djokovic did not predict ambitious things for him last year for this tournament. I said, what does Novak care? Like, why does this matter to Novak? And therefore, why is he going to play well? That was basically my argument. Like, motivationally, I just didn't see it. And then he made the final. He lost to Sinner, but he made the final. And this year, it's similar. Like, the motivational argument stands, but I'm not going to be fooled again because a well-rested Djokovic in best out of 3 on a fast hard court, he does not need to be peaking physically in order to get through these matches. He can, especially when relaxed, he can just lean on his skills and serve pinpoint and use his ball striking. Doesn't really, he can avoid things getting overly physical. If he doesn't play great defense, okay, he can still hold, stay on top of points, okay, whatever. And it just seems like it's not a massive task for Djokovic to win a lot of these matches, even if he's not, rearing to go in peak physical condition. That said, he could lose in the first round. Like, just look at Djokovic's season. Outside of majors, look at the last 2 seasons. Outside of majors, the new reality for Djokovic is he might lose first or second round outside of a slam. That is also the new reality. So I wouldn't be surprised either way. But if I'm looking at his draw, I'm thinking he's going to get through it. He's going to make the semis. I'm not going Ben Shelton. Shelton's coming off the shoulder issue. And I just think it's so important for Ben that the serve and the forehand are dialed in to the max. If that's not the case, I think he's just so upset prone. If the forehand is at all erratic, if the serve is just a little bit safer, less damaging, that's where I just think he can be exposed. And Diallo, especially somebody who's going to get into the net on Shelton's backhand. I'm rolling the dice on Diallo, who I think at some point is going to break through at a bigger event. He's already, of course, won his first career title on the grass earlier this year in the Netherlands. But he's very confident in his identity. He serves well. He comes forward. He's becoming more and more polished as a volleyer, and I think in quick conditions where he can just play attacking tennis. He's competent off the ground. I love his footwork. His footwork is great for his size. How about a breakthrough week for him? I don't know. I'm going to go for it and see what happens. Finishing up on Jannik Sinner's quarter, the top seeds are Fritz, Rune, Bublik, Mahac, Humbert, Griekspoor, and Pechi Pericard. My dark horse here, couldn't find one. Just don't like the unseededs here. My upset alert, however, is Talon Griekspoor, and my early popcorn is late popcorn. I'll explain in a moment. Griekspoor is on a really massive slump, 0-6 since the start of the hardcourt swing, has to play Brooksby. Frankly, there's nobody, and I could have made Brooksby maybe my dark horse, but there's nobody I'd want to play less when feeling frustrated than Jensen Brooksby. Because Jensen Brooksby is a guy who everybody feels like they should beat until they've lost. Everybody looks at him and says that this guy, I've got this guy, I'm better, I'm more skilled, my attributes are better, I'm going to win, and then he beats you. Like, that's the kind of player he is. And if you're not enjoying yourself on the court, that's the last guy you want to play. It's the guy who's going to drive you nuts and is going to completely strip you of your confidence. The reason why I made my early popcorn, late popcorn is because I think that this is the quarter that is by far the most loaded. You have obviously the top player in the draw in Jannik Sinner. You also have the best 5 through 8 seed in the draw in Taylor Fritz. Your top 16 seeds are Holger Rune and Alexander Bublik. And for Rune, we know that he is known to show flashes here and there, which we've seen twice this year at Indian Wells and Barcelona. For Bublik, more so, though, he's red hot, and it's not just the smaller events where he's been able to win 3 titles in a row at the ATP level before kind of running out of gas and taking a bad loss last week. It's also the slams. It's also a nice little run certainly at Roland Garros, a great run, and then a decent run, his best ever run at the U.S. Open before he got crushed by Sinner. But first time in the 4th round of the U.S. Open. So I feel like the improvement is legit and real for Bublik. I think he's a top 20 player now. I think he's going to continue to play like one. And not just a top 20 player. I think he's, again, like a very dangerous top 16 seed in this context. And then you have Tomas Machac, who made the semis here last year. I don't know if he has that in him again, but it's worth mentioning. And Pechi Pericard, who nobody wants to play, but it could be a rematch against Taylor Fritz. When I say rematch, I'm referring to their match that they played at Wimbledon. Pechi Pericard, despite somebody who, to be honest with you, week in and week out, is not making runs or threatening top players, he's still somebody that nobody wants to play. So I think this quarter is loaded. I think the seeds rule. I just think that there's a lot to work with here. And then, if Fritz and Sinner play in the quarters, that is going to feel kind of like a final. And as I reveal my quarterfinal prediction, I do indeed have Sinner over Fritz in the quarterfinals. Now, Taylor was dealing with a leg issue late in Tokyo, which maybe I should have mentioned at some point in the analysis. I just didn't really have a natural place to fit it in. But if this is a letdown spot for Taylor, if he's physically not right, if he takes a loss, I would totally understand. But I am having a little bit of trouble picking Rune over Fritz right now because of how well Taylor has been serving. And if you serve great against Holger, usually you get some decent reward out of that. For Sinner, I just keep waiting for him to play a terrible match one of these weeks. And it's just not happening. Let's see what happens against Lerner Tien. But if he wins that match, he will have come into Shanghai once again, having only lost to Alcaraz and Bublik in the last year plus, and that's it. And he certainly didn't play a terrible match against Bublik in Halle. So he's just not getting upset. He's just taking care of business. He's the defending champion here. He won it last year. The conditions are good for him. The only set he lost was a tiebreaker against Juan Martín Echeverry. And the Fritz head-to-head, to me, that's been pretty straightforward. I have not felt at any point like Taylor has something of interest for Jannik Sinner. Not really. Even though I think Taylor has played some of those matches pretty well. Final weekend prediction. It is time. This has been a long Monday match analysis. We've earned it. Let's do it. De Minaur over Auger-Aliassime, Sinner over Djokovic, and Sinner over De Minaur in 2 sets. I put 2 sets. It's been very difficult for De Minaur to take sets off of Sinner. He did manage to do it in the semifinals of Beijing. I think Jannik and Alex are both playing really, really high-quality tennis. This is a great draw opportunity for De Minaur, who has lost to Sinner in a hardcourt Masters 1000 final before, Canada a couple of years ago. It would be very fun to see De Minaur get to rematch Felix after they played in the U.S. Open quarterfinals in a very nervy match. I'm sure that they can play a higher quality of tennis if they run it back and do it again. And Felix is 3-0 against Alex on hardcourt. But I'm just a lot more confident in De Minaur to make the semifinals compared to Felix, and that plays into why I want to put him through to the final. But also, I think mentally, I think he'd play that match against Felix like an absolute animal. I think he would be just so locked in and fired up to try to amend the loss in New York, which De Minaur knows was a bad loss, or he at least feels like it's a bad loss. And I don't see like a specific matchup issue for Minaur there. So I think he could get the first win on a hard court over Felix. And it would also be a lot of fun to see what Djokovic can do best of 3 against Jannik Sinner. But it's not like we haven't seen it before. We saw it at this event last year. I think we saw it at the ATP Finals. So we have seen it play out. Yeah, last year at the ATP Finals, we saw it as well. It's not as if the only thing that has stopped Djokovic from beating Jannik is just best of 5. But it would be really interesting to see, once again, like without the physical limitation, can Novak perhaps change something? And I think no matter what, it would be incredibly rewarding for Novak to, before he retires, just beat Sinner again and kind of end the streak that Jannik is on against Novak. Head-to-head in Sinner de Minaur is 11-0, 11-0 for Jannik, and I do think that he will be your champion when it's all said and done at the Shanghai Masters, collecting another without the threat of Carlos Alcaraz. Hope you enjoyed. Don't forget to subscribe. I'll see you next time.